Great generals win wars on the battlefield, but great statesmen, well, they win wars without needing a battlefield. And Donald Trump may well have just won a war against China without a single shot even being fired. My name's Topher Field. This is the Topher Project, and I help people like you to understand the world as it changes rapidly around us. If that sounds like your thing, give me a like and a follow. China can't project power yet. To be a global superpower, you really need three things: technology, and specifically military technology, industrial capacity to manufacture and replace things that get destroyed during the war, and the minerals to feed into that industrial capacity with which they make the weapons of war. Now, China are catching up very quickly on the technology front, and in some areas of technology, they're actually doing really well. But when it comes to actual weapons of war, I'm talking elite fifth generation fighters, I'm talking stealth submarines, nuclear long range, deep blue water, ocean going submarines, ocean going fleets of aircraft carriers and the aircraft to go with them. These sorts of technologies, even main battle tanks, they're just not up to snuff at this moment in time. Now, granted, they're catching up, but they're not as close as some people would like you to believe. On the industrial capacity front, well, they've definitely got that. They have the ability to manufacture like nobody else. But that's of limited use unless you are manufacturing the right technologies. So they've got a bit of a catch-22 there. The industrial capacity, well, they have it, but it's not much good to them until their tech catches up, and that's probably still another 15 to 20 years away. But their big Achilles heel is the resources. All that industrial capacity and all the latest technology do you no good if you can't feed in the resources needed to keep the machine of war turning. Just ask how the Nazis went with their jet planes. Superior technology came at the end of the Second World War. They couldn't manufacture the jet fuel for them, and thus they had no real impact on the outcome of the war. China knows that it does not have the resources to fight a multi-year war. America wouldn't be baited into some short conflict where they tried to take over the Chinese mainland. That is madness. America would run blockades. They would run an elongated war specifically targeting the Achilles heel of China, which is their inability to get resources. China itself has certain resources in abundance within its own borders, but it lacks other crucial resources, and the actual terrain inland of China is very, very hostile and very, very difficult to get large amounts of these resources shipped into China, especially in a wartime scenario where those shipping routes would become extremely vulnerable to enemy action. Making matters worse for the Chinese is the fact that actually they get a lot of their resources from American allies like Australia. We literally ship to them the iron and the coal out of which they manufacture the steel that they need to keep their industry turning. That's a pretty big weakness if you want to become the top dog and yet you depend on your main rival's allies for your resources. The Chinese know about this problem, obviously, and that's what the Belt and Road Initiative was intended to fix. The idea was that they would splash stupendous amounts of money, I'm talking hundreds of billions of dollars, into generally developing poorer countries where their dollars would go further and where they could perhaps do a bit of a financial takeover of the local authorities, put so much money in, have so much ownership, have so much leverage that those countries really would become puppet states, vassal states of China, and thereby they would secure the resources that they needed and the shipping lanes required to get those resources into China for their industrial capacity to turn into weapons of war when the time comes. And their project's been going really well, actually. The Belt and Road Initiative has been tremendously popular in the Pacific, in Africa, and other parts of Asia, where China have been able to go in and spend that money and build ports and develop mines and create shipping lanes and technologies and de facto take over other people's governments. In fact, it's gone so well that a new bloc has formed, BRICS. You've probably heard of it: Brazil, Russia, India, and China. There's been talks about mutual currencies and all sorts of other arrangements. None of that's really come to fruition yet, but nevertheless, China has certainly made some friends along the way. And as a libertarian, by the way, I have no problem with voluntary association between countries. People say, oh, BRICS is a threat. A threat of what? So long as they're a trade association, I see no problem here. But of course, with China, there is always that little extra something there. And of course, this was happening against a backdrop of US passivity. They weren't really using their top dog status as the world's most powerful military or the world's largest economy to really block or veto or stop any of this. In fact, China were bold enough to even bring their Belt and Road Initiative into Australia. In my former home state of Victoria, our former Premier Daniel Andrews actually signed the state up. A memorandum of understanding was signed and then vetoed by the Australian federal government because clearly it was not in the national interest for us to be drawn towards China when our closest ally is very much the United States. But to this day, we have Chinese ownership of a number of crucial Australian assets, including the Port of Darwin and other assets elsewhere. So the Belt and Road Initiative has actually made successful inroads into many US allies. Not to mention, of course, great success in Africa and the Pacific and parts of Asia, where they've developed all of that infrastructure to solve this problem of a lack of resources. And again, I'm all for free trade, including foreign investment and foreign ownership. I've got no problem with it, as long as all they want from me is my money. As I've covered before in videos on this channel, I'm not afraid of people that want my money, as long as it's voluntary. It's the people that are trying to buy power that worry me. And with the Belt and Road Initiative, that is exactly what China have been doing. And it's gone very, very well until 2 weeks ago. Because suddenly Donald Trump is now the President of the United States of America, and this Trump 2.0, the return of the Trump, is a very different Trump to the one that we saw in 2016 to 2020. In just the last 48 hours, we've seen Canada and Mexico capitulate to Trump's demands regarding securing their borders, backing down from an alleged trade war that was about to erupt on the North American continent. I did say all along that I was hoping that Trump was just using tariffs as a threat, as leverage in this bargaining game that he was playing, and that he didn't actually mean it. But obviously, if you're going to use something as a bargaining chip, you have to be willing to follow through with it. But thankfully, we'll never find out, because both Canada and Mexico have backed down. Those tariffs have been stayed for 30 days, and I expect that they will never be introduced, because Mexico and Canada, if they know what's good for them, are going to secure those borders, and those tariffs will never ever be needed. But them rolling over and playing nice is kind of expected. They do share land borders with the United States, and they trade an enormous amount of their economy backwards and forwards. So that's kind of to be expected. The big one, the one that is literally reshaping global geopolitics, is what just happened in the last 24 hours with Panama. Panama have announced that they are ceasing their association with China's Belt and Road Initiative. This is big. The Panama Canal is absolutely essential to the BRICS alliance. It is the main shipping route between Brazil, part of the BRICS alliance, and China. Brazil, being resource rich, are helping China and supplying some of the resources that China so desperately need, while they are developing resources elsewhere in the world. But obviously the Panama Canal is also essential to US shipping and allied shipping all over the world. It's an incredibly busy seaport. If you cast your mind back to the impact on global shipping when the Suez Canal was blocked for a period of time, you can begin to imagine why a aspiring global superpower might want to have control over something like the Panama Canal. The ability to open and close it, or perhaps have it open for your ships and closed for somebody else's, is a tremendously powerful bargaining chip during peacetime and strategic tool during wartime. And so Panama saying to the world, hey, you know what? China can't pay us enough. Forget the billions of dollars that they're splashing around. We're actually choosing to opt out of that from now on, because we are choosing to realign ourselves with the United States. And the fact that this announcement happened within a half a day or so of the United States Secretary of State Marco Rubio having a sit-down meeting with the President of Panama, well, that makes a pretty clear statement. What they're saying is, you know what? Keep your money. You can't pay us enough. Friendship with the United States of America is more important to Panama than any amount of incentive and any amount of money from anyone else. This is a shot that will be heard around the world. This has already sent shockwaves across the world and is going to undermine people's confidence in the Belt and Road Initiative and have other countries second guessing, do we really want to keep going deeper into this alliance with China and giving them more and more economic and cultural and political control over our small countries and our resources? Or do we perhaps want to back off a little bit, because if it's not true that China are in the ascendancy, if it's maybe true that America are now coming back and they're going to continue to be the world number one for the foreseeable future, then maybe we don't want to nail the Chinese flag to our mast. They may not all abandon the Belt and Road Initiative. There is an awful lot of coin on offer after all, but there is going to be a cooling of enthusiasm, and China are going to find that some things that used to be easy are now hard, and some things that used to be hard are now impossible. This is literally reshaping global politics right before our eyes. And if more countries switch back to aligning with the United States, then that means an extension of the Pax Americana, this historically peaceful period. Yes, look it up, believe it or not, the last 70, 80 years since the end of the Second World War have been historically some of the most peaceful decades in human history. And if America remain number one, then that peace is likely to continue. In fact, I would go so far as to say that with this decision by Panama to realign with the United States and to reject China's overtures and money with the Belt and Road Initiative is, at a minimum, a postponing of World War III, and quite possibly, World War III has already been won. Donald Trump won it without firing a shot. I'm Topher Field. I'm a veteran Australian political commentator. I've been doing this since 2009, and I help people like you to understand the world as it changes around us. I'm the award-winning director of the documentary Battleground Melbourne. You can watch that for free at battlegroundmelbourne.com. I'm the best-selling author of Good People Break Bad Laws, goodpeoplebreakbadlaws.com if you'd like a copy. And of course, you can follow me on all of my socials at Topher Field. If you've found this valuable, please leave me a like, leave me a comment, maybe even subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.